This is our first in-person event since COVID started. Really delighted to have these two wonderful authors here. You can see from their sheet that we have for publicity that it would take me about half an hour to read all the books they've written, all the prizes they've been nominated for. So, but I'll introduce Rachel Howzell Hall first. She is the author and LA Times book prize finalist for And Now She's Gone. And her latest book is back there, These Toxic Things. She's going to be interviewing Lee Goldberg, who's been here before, a wonderful local author. This is his third book in the Eve Ronin series, and I think a lot of you have already read Lost Hills. That was our first book that we had, that we discussed. And then there's Bone Canyon, and now Gated Prey. So without further ado, I'll give it over to the authors.
Thank you all for coming, by the way. It's great to be with people again.
So this book, why Eve Ronin? Because we've never talked about this series before. Why this book? Why Gated Prey and Lost Hills? What's the point of?
To make money. No, I set out to write a police procedural. I love police procedurals. I love the Harry Bosch books by Michael Connelly. I love the John Rebus books by Ian Rankin. I love Ed McBain's 87th Precinct. And I had an idea for a police procedural that I wanted to write. And I've been doing these kind of books, mysteries and thrillers, for quite some time. And I've made a lot of contacts with law enforcement. And I got invited to a homicide investigators training conference in Green Bay, Wisconsin. These are conferences that actual homicide investigators have to go to. I think they have to do 24 hours. No, this was, it rose out of it because I met these guys there, but the homicide detectives have to recertify. I don't think it's true in every state, but they have to do 24 hours of education every year, and they hate it. They just hate it. But I got invited to one of these conferences, no civilians allowed, and you can tell who the cops were. I mean, some of them were wearing badges and guns, but the others just had that look, you know. And then there's me. Hi! You know, I mean, I clearly wasn't a cop, and I was ostracized. And I had, like I said, a book in mind that I wanted to write. And one of the cases being presented was about why it's important when a homicide detective goes to the scene of a crime that they forget their homicide detectives. That they purge their minds of all the homicide investigator common sense, everything they think they know, and approach each case like a virgin. Because if they didn't, they wouldn't have solved this case. Because this case defied all the common sense assumptions about homicides. And so they started laying out the case. The detectives, the uniformed police officers, the blood spatter analysts, the forensic investigators, the prosecutors were all there presenting the case. And I was asking a ton of questions. I mean, I was in the dark, so the guy presenting didn't know that. So I asked a lot of questions. And then at lunchtime, I asked him more. And he said, you know, these are really great questions. May I ask you what law enforcement agency you work? I said, yeah, I'm a senior investigator with the WGA. He said, I'm not familiar with that one. I said, Writers Guild of America. He said, you're a damn writer? How the hell did you get here? And I pointed to the guy who was running the conference. The guy waved, and the detective said, well, if he likes you, I like you. And your questions are good, so keep asking him. And that night in the hotel bar, I bought every cop drinks. And so they realized that the Hollywood guy was great for free drinks, and they loved me. But I could not get that case out of my head. I went back to my hotel room that night, and I'm lying in bed thinking, how do you have a case where you come in and you forget everything you know about being a homicide detective and approach it like a virgin? Well, what if my character has never investigated a homicide before? Well, that doesn't work, because to become a homicide investigator, you need to have skills and experience and rise to that level. Well, that's interesting. What if this detective gets it because they don't deserve it? That's interesting. And also, I was tired of reading about middle-aged white male police detectives
Play a lot of jazz.
who play a lot of jazz and drink too much and have ex-wives, and they're haunted by the serial killer who murdered their family, and they're haunted by their time in Nam. They're always haunted, and they're brilliant, and they know it, but no one else appreciates their brilliance. And I wanted to write something entirely different. So I started the character of Eve Ronin, this young woman who is 25 years old, has no experience, gets the job, which you know about later how she gets the job, but gets a job she doesn't deserve and she knows it. So she has to prove herself to everyone around her, to the media, and to herself. And she gets handed this horrible case that would tax the very best detective. And then I thought, where am I going to set this? Well, if I set it in Los Angeles, good God, how many books have been written about police officers in Los Angeles? You wrote Joseph Wamba, Michael Connolly, and then there's all the TV shows that have been set here. What new observation? I've learned reading these toxic things. There are lots of observations, but what new observations could I make that haven't been made before? So I decided I'll set it in the Lost Hills jurisdiction of Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, because the Sheriff's Department hasn't been written about, and Calabasas and Topanga and Agoura and Malibu Creek State Park, and it's such a unique ecosystem, and it captures so much culture and race and finance, and it's got everything. It's a world unto itself, and there are all these jurisdictional disputes. I realized it was a very fertile ground, and I didn't sleep that night. By morning, Eve Ronin and Lost Hills was born. I took that case, I fictionalized it, I moved it to LA, and that, I want to say the book wrote itself, it didn't, but I was driven to write it, and it was the biggest critical and commercial success of my publishing career.
Which is crazy because you've been around forever, but to
Forever, forever. I mean, the plastic surgery makes me look younger, but forever.
So one reason I love the story, well, we kind of touched on it. There's so many Los Angeles stories, and I'm a native Angelino, and I too was tired of those same kind of trophy things that are work, they're awesome or whatever. But I grew up in the Crenshaw area, in the predominantly Black area, and those stories aren't told. And so there's so many other stories to mine, and I connected with Calabasas because it's like I know Calabasas. I knew it before it became, Kardashian,
Right.
but I didn't know it. And so reading the story, the series, I got to know a city that you think you know, and it's like, this is not.
There's so many levels to this area. I mean, when you think about Lost Hills, you've got Hidden Hills, which is a city unto itself. You've got rural Agoura, you got hippy dippy Topanga, you've got the rich and powerful and Calabasas behind their gates. You've got the movie aspect. You've got the Paramount Ranch, you've got Malibu Creek State Park, which for years was the 20th century backlot, and you also have Malibu, and you have all the celebrities and the beach culture and everything there, and you're surrounded by Los Angeles and Ventura County and all of that, and it's a pressure cooker. I mean, think about all the interesting cases that have happened here.
People disappear here.
Oh yeah.
I'm thinking about the young Black woman who disappeared, and the family man at the camping site. And it's like, if you didn't know this city, you'd be like, oh, that LA. It's like, well, it is, but it's not. There are more wild things out there.
My second book, Bone Canyon, I'm not giving away too much, it's been reported about before, but Lost Hills ends with a giant fire sweeping through Malibu and Santa Monica Mountains before the Woolsey fire. I had predicted it. And one of the interesting things after the Woolsey fire is so much brush was burned away in those canyons, it revealed dead bodies and wreckage of airplanes and cars and things, people that had been lost, trapped inside all that vegetation and deep canyons, and finally all cleared out. And it was fascinating. And that book also kind of wrote itself, because I mean, how do I resist that?
It's hella spooky. It's like the Bermuda Triangle. Just
Exactly.
Kind of right there. No, there's so much. As a crime writer, it's unfortunate, but we're going to be writing things forever, it seems, because even just that, all that discovery of remains and planes and trains and all the rest of it.
What do you mean, Kobe Bryant? The helicopter crashed right below my house up here.
And the deputies,
Yeah.
right? It's like, how many different directions do you want to take a story? So seeing that you have been writing for a moment.
A
now,
long time. Is my philosophy back, Sean?
Yeah. So what inspires you? I mean, you've kind of written everything. What do you get excited about?
I love telling stories. I've loved it since I was in kindergarten. My mom, remember those pieces of paper when we were in kindergarten that had really big lines?
Yeah.
And the first thing I wrote when I was a kid is, I want to tell stories. And my mom had that frame. I am doing exactly what I dreamed of doing when I was a kid. I'm the luckiest SOB I know. I wanted to be a writer when I was a kid. I'm a writer now. And I'm doing the same thing I was doing when I was 10 or 11 years old. I'm sitting at my computer. I'm sitting at the keyboard, and I'm listening to TV themes and James Bond themes, and I'm making stuff up. And I'm not happy if I'm not writing. I get anxious and
Yeah, when
fidgety
people
and
talk about how hard it is, and I still work a day job. I'm a writer for Cedar Sinai, and you know, that's a blessing because I get to use my talent for that. But I get up at 4:40 every morning
good
to
God.
write. But and I'm a mom of a 17-year-old. So that is like the only time really that I have to myself. But I look forward to it because I'm doing that thing that my parents always, I was writing on everything. Writing in my brother's yearbook, writing, you know, back in the church bulletin, it was just writing.
This is why I know I'm the luckiest person I know, because I have made a living as a writer since I was 15 years old. I put myself through college as a writer. I supported myself after college. I've always written for a living. And I'm blessed that I'm able to do that. I'm also terrified that, you know, one day it's gonna run out, and it was today, by the way. I was in my computer and realized, I told my wife and daughter, see if there's any job openings at Arby's, because I'm ready. It's finally left me, whatever talent I had is gone. And my wife and daughter are used to it, because I have these typical stages in the beginning of a project where I realize I have no talent left, I have no stories to tell. It's just one cliche after another, and I'm a fraud, and it's finally come out. That was also today.
Does that ever go away?
I hope so, but I keep waiting for it to go away. I keep waiting for that moment where, oh, it's so easy. What's weird is when you've written as much as I have, not just in books, but I've written hundreds and hundreds of hours of television. It doesn't get easier. It gets harder. I remember I was writing a monk book. Based on, I worked on the TV show Monk, and I also wrote 15 novels based on a TV series. And I was writing a monk book. It was so well. It was so funny. It was just flowing. I was in touch with my muse, and God, I'm so clever. God, I'm so great. It comes out so easy. And I realized I've written it before. I've written this scene before. And it turned out I was just repeating something I'd already done, and I was so depressed. Oh God, it's like, everybody thought I crossed the barrier. No, I'm just a hack.
Now, as a father, and we both have girl children.
Yeah.
Yours is older, but you know, they're still your babies. I find two things. I find myself, especially with toxic things, I am no longer centering my experience as a Black woman in Los Angeles. And this story is about a 23-year-old young woman who's just graduating, and she's living behind her parents' house, and bad things happen, right?
Very bad things happen.
Very bad things, interesting bad things happen. Part of my reason for writing this is because of my fear as a mom. You know, my daughter and I were, all three of us, my husband, daughter, and I were very close. I fought for her, like when I was pregnant with her, I had breast cancer. So she was very, very, very precious to me, and she is Mickey in many ways. And as she's getting older, and we're in college application lab right now.
Oh, boy.
She's. I'm excited.
Don't let your daughter sleep with suspected serial killers.
Yeah.
I tried to avoid that in my raising my daughter, but
You
after
just
reading
don't
your
know.
book,
You just don't know sometimes.
yeah,
After they buy me dinner, it's kind of like, yeah, but I find myself being excited about her next stage, but I find myself being fearful of that because boys are crazy. To be honest, you know, I'm married to one, 25 years, you're crazy.
Yeah.
You're crazy.
I am crazy.
Don't you know?
You have to be crazy to sit and make stuff up all day.
Exactly.
That's what I mean. I pretend for a living. You've got to be crazy to do that.
Do you find yourself putting your fears of being a father into your stories? And if so, like, how do you?
I don't put any of my fears of being a father into the story necessarily. You can argue that every character is me.
Yeah.
You know, there have been times where my wife has read my books and said, "You're a sick man." Because these characters may not be, but they all came from your head. And what are you doing thinking those thoughts? Because those are nasty things to think about women and other people. And my wife has said that if she dies before me, she doesn't care if she's hit by a meteor or a bus. She wants a full investigation. Because I think of ways to kill people all day long, get away with it. But the heroine of Gated Prey and this series is the same age as my daughter. So I do at times think about my daughter as Eve Ronan, what my daughter do and that thing. And I keep waiting. It hasn't happened much, but we're in a different world now. And we can get into the details of how much this is valid or not. But where you're not supposed to write outside of your own experience, which I think is wrong, but you know, it's cultural appropriation or what have you, but I'm writing about a 26-year-old woman. I haven't been a 26-year-old woman in quite some time, but I've been around a lot of women. I mean, I've been married for 30-some years. I have a 26-year-old daughter. I have sisters. I was raised by a single mother. I know how women think, or I like to think I know how women think. And I enjoy writing from that point of view. Plus, as a father and a husband, I am so tired of the way men write women. As if all a woman thinks about is her breasts and her breast point of view on something.
Yeah.
Her breasts are in the room and we're children.
Yeah.
Her breasts were hungry. Her breasts are, I mean, it's like, no.
Or how we look in jeans.
Yes, like it's always the male gaze, and I don't think my books have the male gaze. I remember when I was writing the monk books, I wrote them first person from the point of view of monk's assistant. And my wife had read one of the books, and she said, "I don't understand you at all." What do you mean? Just, well, it's obvious from reading the monk books you know how to clean things. You don't clean a damn thing. And also, from the monk books, it seems like you understand women, but that's clearly not true in everyday life. Why can't you be more like the people you write about and less like, I don't know, you?
Yeah.
So
Exception.
I think my books keep me from being in therapy. I think they keep me sane. They allow me to exercise a lot of anxieties. And I think my wife's right, and other people are right. Every character is in some degree, some aspect of me, some dark side of me, or some feminine side of me, or some creepy side of me.
No, but what you're saying is, I find to be true. For me, books and writing have always been my escape. I grew up in a house with 4 kids. I was a quite bookish woman. Whenever I didn't like drama. I didn't like arguing with my parents, and I would disappear. And I write about it. I still have all my diaries from 4th grade up until junior college. And so, but that was how I dealt with it.
Well, you and I are identical. Yeah. My parents divorced very early, and I was raised by a single mother who was the Paris Hilton of her day. My father was a television anchorman in San Francisco. He talked like this all the time. The same tone of voice I'm using now, and the same insincere smile on his face. Even in casual conversation, he spoke like this. And when he laughed, it was like this. So I never knew people who found you amusing. My mom was a model, and she was beautiful, and she was head of California Panhellenic, and she did fashion shows and stuff. And this was in the 70s and the sexual revolution. All these men wanted to sleep with my mom, and she wasn't able to do it because she was married, so she stopped being married. And then my mom was going to all the big parties in the Bay Area, and was always getting written up in the social columns. So the Oakland Tribune, and later the Contra Costa Times said, "Well, since you're at these parties anyway, how would you like to write about them?" So my mom became a gossip columnist, party columnist. There was a lot of drama. My mom had a lot of lovers in the house. The way I dealt, I was the oldest of 4 kids. So I was like a brother, but also the father figure in my family. So I was under a lot of stress, and I would do exactly what you were doing. I would hide in when there was the screaming and yelling and whatever, I would hide in my fiction. And that helped me through it. And I still remember we had an earthquake once in Walnut Creek where I grew up, and I was writing, and I had a bookcase in my desk under the bookcase. And the bookcase fell, and I fell backward. All the books in the bookcase fell on top of me. And I looked down the hall, and my sister runs by, my brother runs by, and my sister runs by, and my mom runs by. Some guy in underwear, and I'm lying here dying. You know, I crawl up underneath my bookcase, and I find the whole family and I die underneath the kitchen table. Like, how could you leave me there? But I'll tell you a quick story about my mom. So my mom was a gossip columnist, and as I mentioned, she liked to sleep around, and she was with some guy in Santa Barbara, and there was some storm in Santa Barbara, and she got stuck there and couldn't turn in her column. So she called me from Santa Barbara and said, "You have to sneak into the newspaper. Don't let anybody see you. Find my reporter's notebook, and you have to write my column and file it. Don't let anyone see you." So I creeped into the newspaper, and I wrote my mom's column. No one noticed the difference. So my mom comes home, and being a smart-ass kid, I said, "Your job's not so hard. Anybody with a high school education could do your job." She said, "You're right." So my mom started going on vacations and would leave me all of her reporter's notebooks, and I would go in and file her columns for her at midnight.
She was so smart.
I resented the hell out of her for that. But later on, I realized she had given me a wonderful gift. I had to learn how to write in someone else's voice. I had to write like my mother. And that helped me become a freelance writer in television and copy the voice of other, because when you're a freelance writer in television, your job is to mimic the voice of the showrunner. And it allowed me also to get in the heads of different characters. I didn't go to these parties, so I had to pretend based on the dialogue that she had in her notebook, what they were like and describe the party and that I had attended.
Yeah.
And she did me a great service.
Yeah. No, and that's, I look at my day job as that, as one of the writers, I ghostwrite, like executive communications of the CEO of Cedar Sinai and doctors and all the rest of it. And so when it comes to my own writing, you know, I have that muscle already. It's like, oh, I know what's going to sound like. Oh, I know what this, I can sound smart. I can't add, but I can write like it. So are there things that you won't write about?
I tend not to write about children being endangered, because since I became a parent, I find that hard to take. I don't like sexual assault. It's a weird thing to say. I don't like sexual assault. Some of you may like it, but not me. I mean, I don't like writing about it. I think it becomes kind of prurient, and I think too many times writers fall on that and create false conflict. There are other conflicts who put women in without sexually assaulting. So I have a heroine who's been in 3 books and she has not been sexually assaulted and never will be. Though to be fair, that's not entirely true. My second book was about 3 women who've been raped, and their rapes have been covered up by the LA County Sheriff's Department. But that was not the same thing. I wasn't depicting the rapes. I was dealing with the post-traumatic.
It was a torture form.
Yes, and there's way too much of that.
Yeah.
I don't get any pleasure out of that.
Well, that was my next question. What are you tired of seeing in nonfiction? I mean, we're having a great renaissance right now of diverse voices, all provincial race, all kinds of things.
Well, there's something I'm tired of that you actually managed to put a whole new spin on. I don't want to reveal any secrets of your book, but I am sick to death of serial killers. It's been done to death, not just in books, but there's been Criminal Minds with 387 episodes of that show, not mentioning CSI and all that. With the exception of this book right here, I haven't seen a new spin on a serial killer in quite some time. I'm tired of it. So I stay away from serial killers. And I also think there's way, way, way too much emphasis in books now on forensics, especially on TV too. Unless you have a forensic lab in your bathroom or your bedroom or your garage, you can't solve the crime. I don't think there's any pleasure in that. I like character-based stories, character-based mysteries. If the forensics bring out something about character, and it's ultimately character that solves the crime or character that drives you, then it's okay. But I think forensics in and of themselves are boring. Yeah. So that I think there's too many forensics and too many serial killers in fiction right now. And character is getting lost. And there's one other thing I have a big problem with. And again, you don't do this in your book, so it's a good thing too. I'm tired of humorless crime novels. I'm a firm believer that humor is a part of life.
Yes.
Even in the most horrible, tragic, dire circumstances, there is humor. It's certainly been true in my own life.
Well, I'm like, you're so similar. It's kind of crazy. But I remember when I was trying to sell my second book way back in the olden times of 2003, I had editors who said, well, why are you like having your characters make a joke when you're talking about something as serious as that? I was like, well, if you talk to any first responder, they will tell you that to get through this, you know, you have to laugh. And also people, you know, you're crazy people. And sometimes something's really actually pretty funny. And so, yeah, I always come to my writing looking to insert humor where it naturally fits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I can tell you from my own life, I can tell you a Calabasas story, in fact. Ooh. My daughter was in, I think she was in 3rd or 4th grade. She was doing Taekwondo at a place on Ventura Boulevard. And it was spring break, and my brother had offered to take Maddie for the week. So my wife and I got our first week alone in 5 years.
Wow.
And we were looking forward to some time alone for a lot of reasons, but also to go to restaurants where they don't have pictures of the food laminated on the menu. And so the idea was I was to pick up my daughter at Taekwondo and take her down to Palm Springs to stay with my brother. And after Taekwondo, my daughter asked, "Should you be happy?" Ordinarily the answer would be no, but I'm thinking a week alone, my wife, good meals, good stuff. You can have whatever you want. I took Maggie to McDonald's, go and get her a Happy Meal on the way out. So one right here at Mulholland in front of Bristol Farms. On the way out, I tripped over the handicap ramp, flew face first in the parking lot, and broke both of my arms.
Oh my God.
My wife said, when I said I wanted a week with just the two of us, this is not the intimacy I had in mind, yeah. And when they took me to the West Hills Hospital, the doctor said, you know, what happened to you? I said, I tripped over the handicap ramp at McDonald's. He said, no, really, what happened to you? I said, he said, sir, this is not the comments. What happened? I told him. He said, this McDonald's was over a cliff. So it's like, but I can tell you one other quick story. This is a terribly sad thing. You know, my mom passed away not too long ago, and she was very ill, and I picked her up, and the doctor said she's not going to make it through the day. You better alert your family, come up here. She said, do not resuscitate order. So we're going to take her off. Everything. So I get all my family up. We're all around the bed. They take the thing off. She passed away very peacefully. And you call the minister, the clergyman inside the hospital. He comes in. He says, "I'm sorry for your mother's passing. Would you like me to say a few words?" My sister likes to. We're not a very religious family, but my sister likes to hedge your bets. Yes, absolutely. Say a few words. So he gave a very nice speech. Rather than say memorial, whatever. You know, he said some very nice things, you know, God and peace and all that stuff. And when he was finished, he said, "How was that?" My sister said, "That was very nice, very sweet, very moving. Thank you so much." He goes, "Yes, yes, 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 yes." And he's doing this victory dance in front of my mom's corpse, and we're staring at him. Just, "Oh, excuse me. I've been away for 6 months on a sabbatical. I thought I lost it, but I still got my mojo. You guys have been great. Thanks so much. I'm sorry for your loss." And he left. And my brother, who's a writer, said, "I got dibs on it." But we realized my mom would have loved that. It was the perfect way. So here you have something horribly wrong, but also very funny, and one of the saddest points in your life. And I just say those two stories to illustrate that I have never had an experience in my life involving tragedy that didn't have some humor. So when I read some of these dark, horribly serious novels without a single laugh in them, I find them unrealistic because they just don't mirror at least the life I know.
Yeah. And for me, yes, definitely that. And for day job stuff, you know, being at home, I wouldn't be able to come up with you use my creamer battle or don't make fish in the microwave thing. It's like, we don't do that at home. I need to be out to see the crazy and the sad and the morbid. Now,
She's talking about all of you.
Yeah, exactly. My coworkers. You name things that you weren't going to write about. COVID-19.
I'm not writing about it.
No.
I think when it's over, which may never be, we just want to put it behind us. And if you look like the TV show Magnum PI, it's taking place in a future world where COVID's over.
Yeah.
I think it's also going to date my books horribly if I have COVID in there. And I don't think it's something people want to revisit. We've all gone through it. They don't want to be back in it again. So, and my publisher, our publisher, in fact, we share the same publisher, they were adamant. We don't want COVID in the book. We don't want COVID in books. We want them to be able to be relevant whenever people pick them up. Yeah. And I think you want an escape. So you can figure my books either took place before COVID or after. I'm just not dealing with it
head on, or
I'm not dealing with it anyway. I'm not dealing with masks. I'm not dealing with any of that. But we'll see how it shakes out in our lives. I suspect we're going to be wearing masks for quite some time. Maybe less in California than some other states who are not getting vaccinated. So.
Yeah. No, I find it fascinating. I teeter and flirt with it some, and you probably noticed that. Only because I know that right now, well, in the earlier days especially, people were doing things to others by masking it as something other than, well, masking it as COVID. My wife is dead. She was sick. It was COVID. And there have been stories about, he actually strangled her or suffocated her, or kids are, as a
that's like asking a
writer,
New York writer though, are you going to deal with 9/11? I think a lot of writers said we're not going to touch it.
Yeah, but it's still, I read some that the ramifications of it are kind of in their stories, not necessarily directly, but they're influenced by it. So
I don't mention in my books anything that would date them, like Donald Trump or anything's uniquely of an age. So it could be 2020 or it could be 2024,
Yeah.
unless we're all, we're talking on hologram phones and stuff, then that book would be very dated, but I don't pin down a time.
Okay.
On purpose. And again, maybe that'll change. I can always add COVID. It becomes such an omnipresent thing in our lives that to not have people in masks would make my books seem like historicals. Sue Grafton wrote those private eye novels of Kinsey Milhone. They're all set in the 80s, and no one seemed to mind.
Oh, that's a question. So her husband was like, she would have wanted this, and Sue's like, no, I did not. So what do you think about that whole thing?
I can't comment on, but I'm about to anyway. Well, on what the family dynamics were, but if you're the mystery community is really small, and Sue Grafton, every event she did, every single event, she said, I will never, ever, ever let my books be adapted for film or television, ever. And I've made my family promise on a blood oath not to do it, and I'll come back and haunt them all and terrify them and make their lives a living hell if after I go, they sell my books to TV. She's been dead a year, they just sold her books to TV. So, but you know what? She's dead. Her family may have financial things, I don't, it's not my place to comment
Right.
on what she would have wanted or not
Well,
wanted.
it's intriguing because we've all heard her say, don't you do it.
A million times.
Don't you
A
do
million
it.
times.
Yeah, and up comes the devil.
And I've known Sue since I was 18, I think.
I was about to ask you about the other branding of crime in the street, Janet.
Janet
That's-
Ivanovich.
Yeah.
Her.
So how was that process? What did you
I
learn
am
from
so
each
glad
other?
to finally have Janet off my back. She's been hanging on to my coattails for so long. Go off on your own, Janet. Try to make it. Go off and make some money. Stop leaning on me. Actually, what she's referring to is I wrote 5 books with Janet Ivanovich. Those of you who may not know, Janet Ivanovich is one of the most successful authors in the world.
Yeah.
She's huge. Janet and I have been friends for, I've been married 30 years, at least as long as Ari, my wife and I have been married. We don't even remember how we met, Janet and I. We had to come up with a story to tell people about how we met. It had to be around the time of her first book, One for the Money. We've been friends all these years. Whenever she was in LA, we would have dinner together, and it'd be a 3-hour dinner, and we're very good friends. And on one of those dinners, we were talking about the kinds of books we love reading, the kinds of TV shows we like watching that just aren't being done anymore. And she also was very curious about how I worked with writers on TV shows. She didn't understand how the writers room worked, and also how I could write books based on Monk, even though I didn't create Monk. I still have a very good relationship with the showrunner. He lets me do what I want. And we talked about all that. And so we were talking about the books we like that aren't being done anymore, about working with writers. There's a long, comfortable silence which we have among old friends at a meal. And she looked up at me and she said, why haven't we ever written a book together? You've never asked. And she said, well, why don't we write the book we're kind of talking about, the one that we both love that isn't being done anymore, the Remington Steele, Thomas Crown Affair, the Avengers, but not Avengers like the superheroes, but Jonathan C. It Takes a Thief, and Patrick Me and Diana Ray and all that stuff, and The Saint. And so we talked about it, and we were like getting really excited about it. And I went home and I wrote up and we talked. But I said in an email, if you sober up in the morning and realize you've made a big mistake, I'll understand. And no, she said, I really like this. I have a couple thoughts. She gave me her thoughts. I rewrote it. A day later, she called up and she said, I sent that publisher, we got an offer, and it's X. And I went, oh my God. And she said, yes, it's insulting. Well, yeah, that's horribly insulting. I'm not ready to just got the phone. She said, yes, they can do better. They damn well better. And then she called, I went to Valerie, it's not insulting. And then she called the next day, we got another offer from the publisher, and I went, She said, it's what? I didn't know how I was supposed to react to that. She said, still not good enough. I said, damn right. But who do they think they're talking to? I would have settled for a fraction of what they were. And then they finally came with this number, and she went, that's more like it. I said, yeah. So then 6 months after that conversation, we were #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. And we had so much fun writing together. And the key was, 2 keys, 3. One was, I said, I'm not going to try to imitate your voice. Because if I could be Janet Ivanovich, I would be. So we have to come up with a new voice that's not yours and not mine. And I'm not gonna write anything like, we're not gonna write anything like your Stephanie Plum character. Because it's just gonna feel like a cheap knockoff. And there's a third point, I can't remember. So, oh yeah, the third point was, I had been friends with Janet for so long that she didn't intimidate. And she had other co-authors. So if she had an idea I didn't like, I'd say, that's a terrible idea. I wasn't afraid to express myself and to say yes or no. And I think that was refreshing for her. I wasn't, oh, Janet, she said it wasn't like it was, tablets from God.
Like I would be.
Yeah. So I had that, was comfortable enough that I just wasn't. So we came up with the book and it was so much fun to write. And we had such a good time doing it. And then it was such a success and we did 5 books together. And after the 5, it just, we split up, but not because of any sort of issue. We reached, I thought I'd gone as far as I could go with it. And I had other books like Lost Hills I wanted to write. And I just felt this was the time to leave and do that. And so it was very amicable. There was no, we're still really great friends and I'm glad the series is going on without me.
You can buy some cheese and all this stuff.
Yeah, it was nice. But I learned so much from Janet. I learned it was a graduate course in writing international bestsellers. I learned so much. I thought I was a decent writer before, but I sucked. She made me a far better writer. My wife did the first one to tell you. You're a much better writer since Janet than you were before.
What was one of the biggest lessons?
The biggest lesson I learned from Janet was to find the one key detail in a scene, and that's it. Don't describe the entire room. Describe the one thing that sets that room apart and let everybody else fill in the blanks. Also, don't draw attention to the writing. You want people to get lost in what they're reading. And if you draw attention to the writing, they'll remember they're reading, it's gonna pull them out. So if you want to say something clever, give it to a character to say. And if you can't give it to a character to say, cut it. So I wrote really tight. And then Janet I would write tight right to the bone, and she cut 2 pages, find the one line that really said it. It was my line. I said, God, why didn't I see that? And she's a brilliant editor in that way. So I learned a great deal from her about how to really simplify and tighten my writing. And I think one of the reasons that Lost Hills did so well is because I took a lot of lessons I learned from Janet, though I write something very different than what Janet writes.
Right. So I'm gonna ask one more question and then we'll open it up to questions. But you've done Janet, you're doing this.
I've done
Janet.
Janet. My wife's not supposed to know about that.
What's your dream project? What do you want to do before you're like, okay, now I'm gonna just like go into the woods and just.
I've been very, very fortunate. Every book I've written is my dream project. I'm living my dream. I am the luckiest guy I know. And every book I'm writing at the moment is my dream project. And I've been fortunate that I've already had a long career in TV. So it's not like I'm aspiring to sell a TV series or a movie. I've been there. So that's nice too. I'm not chasing a brass ring or a dream. I've hit the New York Times bestseller list. And so now I'm just writing whatever moves me, whatever I think will entertain me for 4 months or 5 months that I have to write the book. And the fact that people like it is just a wonderful extra. Yeah. And I'm always terrified that this is the book that's gonna bomb. That this is the one where no one's gonna read it. And it'll happen, it just hasn't happened yet.
So what's coming next year?
The next Eve Ronin is coming out in June. It's called Movie Land. And it's inspired by the shootings at Malibu Creek State Park. I take my own spin on the whole Ruda thing and all of that. And it's also inspired by some of the shenanigans going on with the city council downtown, not here, the city council in Los Angeles, the supervisors, all the grifting and stuff. So that book I had to write very fast. I had to write that book in 3 months. It's a long story of why I had to do it so quickly, but it's a lot of fun. And it delves also into the Hollywood history of Malibu Creek State Park, and also how the police officers here, actually police officers everywhere, are constantly having to measure themselves against their TV depictions. When you work in movie land and you're also a real police officer, the impact that has on you.
Wow. Any questions? Yes.
I read the previous 2 books and I enjoyed them very much.
Thank you.
I just was wondering how the sheriffs at Lost Hills feel about some of the ways that they were pictured. I know it's fiction. However, I wondered if they had any comments or
It's
feedback.
interesting. They have not been cooperative at all. When I first started writing Lost Hills, I just wanted a jurisdictional. They wouldn't give it to me. It's public. It's not secret. I had to call Fred Gaines, who's on the city council here, and he got it for me. And then there was something else I needed from, I can't remember what it was. I had to have Sheila Cool get it for me. And these were public documents. I wasn't asking for anything that wasn't in the public domain, and they were blocking me every step of the way. I haven't set foot inside Lost Hills Sheriff Station. I made it up. On the other hand, I have lots of friends in law enforcement, a lot. And I know sheriff's deputies in San Diego and San Bernardino, and I know police officers here on the LAPD. So I've got a lot of feedback. When Lost Hills came out, I got emails from deputies. You have no idea how right you got. No idea. It's like you live in the Lost Hills Station. And while I've been writing these books, there's been such a turnover in commanding officers. I had an event in Agoura 2 weeks ago, One City, One Book, where they were celebrating my book, Lost Hills. And the mayor, Dennis Weber of Agoura Hills, was in the captain's office at the Lost Hills Station and saw my book on his desk. So we're having Lee as our One City, One Book guy next week. So I know they're reading it, but I had no cooperation. None.
I'm not
And
surprised.
I had no cooperation even on a county level. I reached out to their communications officer out in Monterey Park for information, and I get more cooperation from the San Bernardino Sheriff's Department and San Diego and other counties and other states than I get from the one where I live in, which in a way is fine. It allows me to make up more stuff and not worry that I'm stepping on any toes. But like I was here when Villanueva did his speech. I was at I just forgot the King Gillette when they had the big community meeting for the shooting. So I've been to those events and I've seen the sheriff in action and our community leaders in action. So it's reflected in the books. But no, I've had no interaction with the Lost Hills Sheriff Station. They've been no help whatsoever.
Not surprising. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
What advice do both of you have for those folks who aren't able to easily fictionalize a story, but nonfiction storytelling is something that many of us start to to think of storytelling about the truth, essentially from your perspective. But can you comment on nonfiction?
It's weird. I actually see my fiction as nonfiction in a way. What I write, I actually believe. I mean, this is, like I said, this is my way of dealing with things that have happened to me or to friends, and my way of dealing with that. So these characters, they may not exist in real life, but they are composites of people who I love and care about. So I see all story as story, even nonfiction. I mean, one day I would love to write a book like John Krakauer, who wrote Into the Wild and Into Thin Air. But even then, I'm sure he kind of made some, well, that was an argument. He made some things up. But for fiction writers, I think we all kind of see it as nonfiction in some ways.
When I was doing those books with Janet, they were international thrillers. I would go everywhere I wrote about. I would go to Hong Kong. I would go to Paris. I would go to Australia. I would go to Italy. I would go to the places so I had boots on the ground and I could find that telling detail I talked about. You're not going to get it from watching Rick Steves or looking at Anthony Bourdain or whatever. You have to be there and feel it and touch it. And for my police procedurals, I spent a lot of time with police officers. I go to that Homicide Investigators Training Conference. I've been there 3 times. I've attended training at the LA Police Academy. I have a friend who teaches interrogation techniques. I spent time with the FBI. And I do intense research. I will go and find a first responder and do a ride along. Or I will call up a coroner and say, I'm doing something on fetal abduction. Can you send me some photos and tell me about how that, I mean, so I in a way, I'm writing nonfiction, but I find a story to tell it. So my forensics and my police procedure are all accurate. In fact, just yesterday, I was showing my wife an email I got from the head coroner's investigator in the San Bernardino Sheriff's Department, who read Bone Canyon. She said, my God, you got it exactly right. Like you're an investigator yourself. How do you do that? That's why I have help from people like you.
Yeah.
I just distill it in a way that my audience will understand. I don't fill it with a lot of, I don't show off in my book. books. I don't want to say, hey, look at all the research I've done, I'm gonna throw in all this stuff. I just throw in enough that you feel the reality and you can color between the lines yourselves.
Yeah.
Just enough reality that you can feel like you're getting an inside look, but not so much you're reading a textbook.
I went to Catalina Island this past weekend because I'm setting a story there, because it's different being, over on an island with bison. And for this book, the character is a digital scrapbook, and she curates memories on something like an Alexa device. And this machine does not exist, but that didn't mean that I didn't research enough to create a machine that could actually exist if, Amazon decides to create.
And they have, they bought your book, they bought the rest of that idea.
I know they have. Why didn't we think of a hologram? Well, there you go. Another question. Yes, ma'am.
Outside of the romance genre, I've never heard of anyone who writes as quickly as you do. Can you talk about your writing habits and your schedule and?
I come from television, so I'm used to having to write a book very quickly. A script very quickly. Because you have a new show, like prepping every 8 or 9 days. And whether you're creative or not, they have to have a script to prep, and you have air dates. And so I'm just used to writing fast. And I also have a short attention span. I get bored if I'm involved in something for too long. And my writing cycle is it's weird. It must be part of my biology, because my brother and my sister have the same internal clock. I do my best writing between 8 p.m. and 2 in the morning.
Oh.
So in a perfect day, I will get up at 9 or 10. I will rewrite the stuff I did the night before. I'll take care of business, which is usually like I still have a television career, so I'll be writing scripts or dealing with other business. I have a small publishing company that doesn't publish my books, but I deal with that. I deal with all the day's work. Administrative stuff, but also scripts or whatever else I'll have to do. And then I'll have dinner, and I'll go upstairs, and then I'll write original stuff, brand new blank page stuff till 1 or 2 in the morning. Repeat again. And I do that until the book is done. And with the books I wrote with Janet, because I had a partner in that, they took about 5 months to write. 1 month to research and plot, 5 months to write. My Eve Ronan books typically take about 3.5 to 4 months tops. And also, I like to write 2 books a year. From a business standpoint, I want to be sure of that revenue. I want to make sure I always have books out. And my publisher loves that. They want to have 2 books a year. If you go on Amazon right now to order Data Prey, but don't, because we have books right here. If you were to go on Amazon, you would see that my next book is already available for pre-order.
Yes.
So I sell a lot of books before my other book is even published. So they like that. They like having your next book available for pre-order when your new book comes out. So it keeps the audience engaged and keeps them invested in your books. So it also keeps me occupied as well. I like to be writing all the time.
Any other questions?
Rachel, when do you write?
So I get up at 4:40.
Yeah.
I feed the dog and the 2 cats, and then I sit down and I write until about 7. And I write my first drafts longhand. I love the feel of pen against a pad. And then I go to work for Cedars, but I do give the best words to me because they're mine. And when my daughter was younger, I would then write like soccer practice or basketball, all those extracurriculars. And then by the time it's 9 o'clock, I'm in bed at 9:20, and it's exact 9:20. I have Golden Girls on the television.
You're too young for Golden
Oh, I
Girl.
love, it's some of the
It's
best
Sex and the
writing.
City.
It's some of the best writing and delivery of lines. And, I love dialogue
Yeah.
and weird situations. And it's.
You mentioned Golden Girls in the book too.
I do, and there's a scene that is with the exception of the red wine, because she's too young to drink. There's a scene where the mom and the daughter are, she's helping her daughter get over some heartbreak, and they're eating popcorn and watching Golden Girls, and that's.
But you're warming my heart, because I was the executive producer of Diagnosis Murder, and most of my audience is dead now. It's nice that there's some young people who are watching the old bogey shows. But,
Yeah, so it takes me a little longer because of the day job. So it takes me, I'm working on the Catalina book now. It's going to take me 9 months before I send it to my agent to read. Yeah,
The other thing is from TV is you learn to write whether you're in the mood or not.
Yeah.
It's like being a sex worker, whether you're in the mood or not, you gotta, you can't, it doesn't matter how much noise there is or where you are, you have to get that script done. So,
Oh, yeah.
so
that's
I would
good.
write on airplanes, I would write in restaurants, I would write in hospital rooms, I would write on the set, I would write at my daughter's soccer games. I would write all the time. You write whatever you can because the script has to get done, and I've carried that over into my fiction writing too.
You know what I noticed, at March 13th, March 13th, Cedar sent us all home to work, you know, because of COVID. And I was writing, you know, this was my COVID book, but I noticed that I missed the commute from home to work. I missed that liminal space because I did a lot of thinking and writing in that time, you know, on Los Angeles from home to Beverly Hills. And I didn't realize that I was having issues until I had to drive to car service in Kingston's and Santa Monica. And my brain just opened up and all these ideas. It's like, oh my God, I miss traffic. It's weird. It was.
One great thing though about the pandemic and writing you wrote it is I don't have to go far to research my book. I go out with the newspaper. It's Calabasas. I write about gated communities. I live in a gated community. I live here in Westridge, on Parkway, Calabasas. So it wasn't like I had to really extend myself to research this book during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Someone had a question over here? Yes.
What did you write at 15 that you got paid for? Your mother's column?
No. Once I realized I could write, I started writing about the entertainment industry for the San Francisco Chronicle, the Los Angeles Times Syndicate. Because my father had this newsman voice, I would do phone interviews with celebrities and producers. They didn't know I was 16 years old. I call up, hi, this is Lee Goldberg with the Contra Costa Times. I'd like to talk to you about greatest American hero. And I would do all these interviews with all these stars and stuff over the phone. And I put myself through school. I'll tell you a funny story. How many of you remember Stephen J. Cannell? Remember he typed and he whipped his, okay. I interviewed him a bunch of times when I was in high school. And I came down to UCLA to go to college. And I was interviewing about some show he was doing. And I made the mistake of saying I was in LA. And he said, oh, I'd love to finally meet you. Oh, crap. He's gonna see I'm a 18-year-old kid and think that I was pulling a fast one. I just wanted to get a job in television. So I walk into his office, it was at Samuel Goldwyn at the time, and the look on his face confirmed my fears. The look on his face was, I've been conned. So I asked him the toughest testicle cutting question I could ask about the financing of this company, and wasn't he blowing it all on whatever that show was, 10 Speed Brown Shoe. And he was like, and then you answered the question. Years later, I was putting myself, working as a journalist for trade publications, and I managed to sell the script to Spencer for Hire, and I was working in television, and I got a job on Hunter as a story editor, which is a show that Cannell was producing. But I never talked to Cannell about it, right? It was one of the shows in his building. I'm walking down the hall, and he saw me. Lee, we have an interview today? Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Come to my office. I'm not here for the interview. What are you doing here, Lee? I said, I work for you, Steve. What do you work for me? I said, I'm a story editor on Hunter. He pulled me into a hug. He said, I had no idea you want to write for television. I said, I didn't want you to know. He said, oh, this is great. And then we just became really good friends. And when he started writing novels, by that time I was writing novels too, and I was doing a different show for him called Cobra. And he would come down to my office and read me aloud his chapter to see if I thought it worked. And we became good friends. And many years later, we were on the book tour circuit together. We were at Madison, Wisconsin. I still remember the moment well. He was in a cigar smoking place. I was walking down the street and I hear, hey, Lee! It was Steve in this cigar place. And we go in and I said, I have a question I've been dying to ask you for years, Steve. When I came and did that first interview with you, did you think that I was being conned? Yes. Then you cut my balls off and cut them to me, and I realized you were a decent guy. So, and then, talk about irony. Years later, when I was executive producer of Diagnosis Murder, I hired Steve Cannell as an actor to play a burned out, over the hill action adventure producer who only talks in cliches. If you could have gone back to me when I was a kid and told me, hey, Lee, this guy you admire so much, you're going to be hiring him someday to play himself on your show, I would have wet myself. In fact, I just did. Yeah. The vision I had is my parents, and my
Yeah.
mom ran past me.
Yeah, any more?
Well, thank you. Oh, yes.
You mentioned Hunter. Isn't he the character that said it works for me?
Yeah, Fred Dwyer.
Is that your line?
Nope, not my line. I would be living on my private jet now. if I- But yes, the nice young man in the back I've never met before.
Yeah. Have you any interest in kind of solve real life crimes or have you ever been approached about that?
I was once approached. I'm trying to remember what the situation was. We got a call from the FBI at home because some plot I'd written in one of my novels, one of my diagnosis murder novels, had been done
Oh,
by somebody. And they want to know if I had any communication with the felon. That's the only interaction I ever had with I haven't thought about that in years. I had to look at my wife to remind myself which book it was. Like, I see that guy calling me. Oh, True Fiction. This woman's holding my book, True Fiction. That's sort of based on my life in a way. I wrote the book community is small, as I mentioned. And I know all these guys who write really tough, manly action adventure stuff. We're schlubs, who couldn't fight their way out of anywhere, who are awkward around women. Yet they write these guys who are, brilliant lovers and, great at hand-to-hand combat. And I know Lee Child really well, and he's nothing like Reacher. He looks like Roger Moore. So I thought, wouldn't it be funny if one of these guys who had to write, who writes books like that, found themselves in that situation? Could they become the guy they write about? Because it comes from their head. I mean, they might have the experience, but they don't know how to think like that character. And that's where that book, True Fiction, came from that you held up. Well, if there are no more questions, Rachel and I would be glad to sign books for you in the back there and answer any questions you're too shy to ask in front of this big, intimidating audience.